As expected, Governor Gavin Newsom signed into law Assembly Bill 1078, which tells school districts that they're not allowed to change any curriculum the state of California recommends. It basically eviscerates local control. Any school district that defies Assembly Bill 1078 will be fined millions of dollars. This also silences any input from parents on what children learn.
Folks, this new law is horrific. It's going to basically truncate the school boards and the ability for parents to have their voice heard. School boards are just going to become a symbolic institution with no real authority. Parents can go to school board meetings. They can work hard to elect school board members that are reflective of their community, of their values, of their concerns as parents. But it's going to be worthless effectively because of this law. And it's not a bill. It's now law. Signed into law by Governor Gavin Newsom. If you believe in parental rights, if you believe in protecting children from the horrific leftist agenda that's pouring into our public schools already, you should be very, very outraged. This is an egregious usurpation of the rights of parents, of community. It basically makes government schools centered in Sacramento and basically abolishes any real meaningful work of school boards when it comes to the issues that matter most to parents, like what's going to be in the curriculum, what books are going to be allowed, what assignments are going to be given to kids, outside speakers, who are they going to be? That is effectively truncated by this new law. And I want to encourage parents out there, if you're in California and you have your child in a public school, think it through and look at your other options, whether it's homeschooling, private schooling, church homeschool co-ops, whatever. Look at your other options, because this is a dark day in California education, and it's going to get, with this new law, a lot darker. Our rights are a gift from God, and they're to be used for God's glory and to further God's kingdom. We're opening the door for government, under the same guise of health and safety, to be able to control our lives, whether it's in terms of our privacy, our information, where we go, even how we live our lives.
I had been told that if I didn't get the vaccine that I would not be able to continue my education.
31 offices across the country handling over 185 cases in active litigation. This just doesn't come out of thin air.
The Supreme Court of the United States ruled in our favor.
This year, police arrested a Christian man exercising his right to free speech.
Hundreds of parents were at the state capitol today, and they were protesting new guidelines for sex education in public schools.
The world's way, it's to isolate, silence, and destroy.
So you're really seeking to represent the low-profile, overlooked group of people in our communities, but then you also don't charge a cent. And so I want to know why you do that and how that happens.
We do it because I believe that's what Jesus would want us to do. You know, tyranny doesn't stop in public education. I wish it did, frankly. We'd have less things to do. But no, tyranny is also in the private sector in business. In Hawaii, there's a symphony orchestra. And in this symphony orchestra, there was a participant who had sincerely held religious beliefs with regards to taking a very controversial COVID-19 vaccination. He expressed his concerns. He expressed his religious convictions against this vaccine, and he was not reasonably accommodated. Now, to talk about this case and what's going on in our defense of this individual, I'd like to bring on PJI attorney Joe Gomez out of our Hawaii office. Joe, welcome to the program. What's going on with this case? You know, why wasn't this employee's request respected?
Hi, Brad. Thank you for having me on the show. Great question. And frankly, it's why we're in court now representing John. John Gallagher is his name. John is a bassist with the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra. He's been with the orchestra for over 30 years. He's a world-class musician, a great guy, and he's a Catholic. In the fall of 2021, late October particularly, the symphony, like many organizations around the country, of course, went ahead and imposed this vaccine mandate on its employees. John was not willing to take the vaccine due to his sincerely held religious beliefs as a Catholic. He timely informed the symphony of his objections to the vaccine on the basis of his faith. He requested an accommodation, provided some reasonable alternatives, which there were, which had existed even before the vaccine, before they imposed the vaccine. Unfortunately, the symphony kind of ran roughshod over that request. They denied it, basically didn't talk with him about any kind of accommodation, and instead just put him on indefinite unpaid leave. As a result, he was damaged, both discriminated against and lost finances and his pay. And so John, what he did next then was to file a charge of discrimination and retaliation against the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra. He filed that charge with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And that charge was with the EEOC for some time, and the EEOC can take some time in its investigations and get into an outcome. And so we were ready in their interim to just go ahead and proceed on our own and to do our own investigation and file our own claim. And so we asked for and were given from the EEOC what's called a right to sue letter. And so with that right to sue letter, that entitled John to go to court and to prove and to investigate and to prosecute his charge, his complaint. And that's what we're doing on John's behalf.
So, Joe, there was clearly intimidation and deception involved in this matter against our client. How exactly was our client treated?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Yeah, unfortunately, in addition to just cutting off John's, or just basically not engaging with John in what's called an interactive process. At the time they imposed the policy, the symphony used an individual, an attorney, to present the policy to the musician members. Now, this was during a Zoom phone call. They were all required to attend. And during the course of this call, essentially, it seems this attorney's job was to basically ram down the policy on these members. Now, the musician members are also members of a musicians union called the Local 677. It's the Hawaii Musicians Union. And this Zoom call was ostensibly for the members to approve this policy. Now, the presenter, this attorney, told these members on the phone that, if you guys don't approve this, they're just going to come up with something even more draconian. At least there are words to that effect, and that's what we allege in our complaint. In addition, the presenter, without anybody identifying themselves as Catholic or whatever on the call, told the members on the call, and by the way, all you Catholics on the call, don't even think about an accommodation, because the Pope said Catholics should take the shot. And so there, John was stunned by that, as were others on the call. And frankly, she's wrong to begin with, because it doesn't matter what the Pope thinks about the shot. If you have a sincerely held religious belief as a Catholic that differs from the Pope, it's still a sincerely held religious belief. You're still entitled to that. It's still a lawful belief that needs to be recognized by, in this case, the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra. Anyway, this person also went on to poo-poo and called silly people who had legitimate claim or concerns about the safety of the shots or the safety of the PCR testing for COVID as well. So there was this attitude and sort of an atmosphere that was created of intimidation, of bullying, of discrimination against John and others on the call by this individual, and just an overall attempt to sort of just to basically say, shut up and take the shot, and here we go. The other piece that the person did was to make comments to the effect of, I don't want to be around the unvaccinated and whatnot, and encouraged others on the call to make similar statements, and they did. So basically, they were targeting people like John from the get-go. So anyway, that's unfortunate that that happened. We include that in our complaint, and we think that that's a basis for retaliation as well as a clear case of discriminated against the likes of John.
Okay, Joe. So, many people may be looking at this saying, well, I'm not a part of an orchestra or a symphony out there. How's it going to impact me? Well, this case is more than just about one individual, isn't it?
That's right, Brad. This case, it's about the workplace, and it's about employees are entitled to protect and preserve their religious liberties and their medical. If they have a disability, they have rights under the Americans with Disability Act as well. But in this case, primarily, what we're talking about is, take it out of the vax context. It's a term of employment where, if there's a term of employment where you work that conflicts with your sincerely held religious belief on a matter, then you're entitled to bring that to your employer's attention and let them know, my sincerely held religious belief conflicts with this term of employment. I'd like an accommodation from this term of employment. And then what's supposed to happen is that you and the employer engage in what's called an interactive process, whereby you come up with reasonable alternatives to the term of employment to accommodate your sincerely held religious belief. Now, essentially, it should be a fairly simple, straightforward process, and the accommodation should be granted. Now, employers can escape that responsibility if they can show that by granting an accommodation, it cause for them an undue hardship. Now, an undue hardship, though, has to be a substantial cost on the employer, or an excessive cost on the employer, for providing the accommodation to you specifically. It can't just be some minimal inconvenience, or very small cost. It has to be substantial. And this was sharpened and made more clear by a recent Supreme Court case that came out a few months ago that was very helpful to employees, and that case is Groff versus DeJoy. And so the court there clarified what the burden was that employers had to show if they were to be able to escape having to provide an accommodation under the law. So as it stands now, we believe that standard helps folks like John, because we certainly think that the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra in this case didn't have an undue burden for having provided John an accommodation, in this case from their vaccine policy. So that's what we're alleging in our lawsuit, and that's what we are confident we'll be able to prove going forward.
Joe, I greatly appreciate the work that you're doing. How does this case look moving forward?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Well, we filed the case some weeks ago. When lawsuits are filed on defendants have an option of filing what's called an answer. If so, the case proceeds into discovery and the rest, or they can file what's called a motion to dismiss. A motion to dismiss is a tool that defendants will use to sort of test or challenge the complaint at a very early stage in the litigation. And they'll raise issues like jurisdiction. The court doesn't have jurisdiction, or there's really no claims that can be granted relief. And so in this case, the Hawaii Symphony has filed what's called a motion to dismiss. We're very confident we'll be able to overcome that. I mean, you never know what the court's going to do, but our complaint is sound, it's well pled. There's the jurisdiction is the court certainly has jurisdiction. There's definitely claims that we're entitled to relief under the law, but we'll see. Maybe the court might take a different look at it. We don't know, but I'm optimistic for sure for it. The other little challenge is that the symphony went ahead and filed that motion without conducting what's called the pre-filing conference that's required under the local rules. So we'll see what happens. We've asked them, since they didn't comply with that rule, it's an important rule, and we've asked them to voluntarily withdraw the motion because they didn't comply with that. And we'll see if they do, great. If they don't, we'll proceed with the hearing on the motion to dismiss and advocate for why the motion should be denied and our complaint should move forward.
Joe, I'm glad you're on this case. You're an experienced litigator. Keep up the good work, and I look forward to finding out how this case turns out in the days ahead. So, folks, you may be out there thinking, what are your rights as a parent? Do you have any rights as a parent? Well, you do, and we have some great resources on our website, pji.org. You can go there. You can get all kinds of information about your rights as a parent over your children with regards to public schools, homeschooling, even just protecting your child against a zealous social worker trying to investigate you or your family. We've got those resources available all without charge at our website, pji.org.
Well, they're in the trenches and they're fighting, and PGI is on the front lines for the battle for freedom and liberty. They've been doing so much to equip pastors across the country and to really fight for the values that have made this country so great. Honored to be supportive of PGI.
We're living in a time when Christians are constantly under assault for their beliefs in the marketplace. And if there's not someone to advocate for them and help them with the legal necessities of defending themselves, they're going to get fired. They have no recourse. Most people don't have the resources to go hire a lawyer. It would deplete everything they own. And most lawyers, quite frankly, across the country don't deal in religious liberty issues.
Well, we're living in some very difficult days in America where basic freedoms and especially religious liberty is under attack. And that's one of the reasons why Pacific Justice Institute is so vitally important to the future of this nation. What a great group of lawyers, first-class, top-rate lawyers who are willing to stand up for freedom and stand up for our American citizens under attack.
Yeah, they can support, they can follow, they can pray. We need more organizations like PJI, and I can tell you that being in the front lines, there's not enough people that are actually in the trenches doing the difficult but tough work, and that's exactly why this organization is so critical.
One of the most incredible things about Pacific Justice Institute is that they do pro bono work. And what does that mean? Well, it means the rest of us have a responsibility. We've got to stand up and provide financial incentives and financial opportunities for these attorneys to get out there and do the fighting. And that's one of the reasons why we have Pacific Justice Institute attorneys on my national radio show, because we want to let people know, hey, there's a need here. These folks are doing very important work, and they're doing very important, successful work as well. And that's why they need our support.
When a Christian is targeted for his or her beliefs, it affects every believer in America. This idea that, well, it didn't happen to me, well, you're next. And when Pacific Justice Institute takes on a case, it's not just that one individual that they really are representing, because a legal precedent may be established from that will protect 1 million believers who could be in the same position for the exact same issue.
Now, folks, we've taken a look at the law, and it's important for us to make sure that we're always on the right track legally. But it's also even more important that we take a look at the scriptures to make sure that we're on the right track spiritually. So let's take a look at a couple verses as they may apply to these situations that we've just talked about. First is Jeremiah 17:9. It says, "The heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it?" We saw this in both cases today, where human nature, in an ugly way, was an affront to people of faith, whether it was the employee working for the orchestra or it was a parent simply wanting to make sure that their child was in a safe environment. What happened was tyrannical. And it goes back to the fact that a human nature is sinful. Human nature can cause human beings to do things that are deplorable, things that are unthinkable at times, things that are just simply unexplainable. That's what we see because it's a part of human nature, and we need to understand that. In so doing, we need to be careful on where we put our trust because of his human nature. And this comes out in Proverbs 29, verse 5. It says, "Fear of man will prove to be a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe." At the end of the day, we need to put our trust in the Lord. And that means we need to do what he commands us to do, to speak out when we see tyranny, to speak up for those who are being threatened, whether it's a child in a public school or someone in the workplace who's outnumbered, outgunned by intimidating employees and employers. This is what we need to do because at the end of the day, our trust is in the Lord. He is our vindicator. He is the one that tells us what's right and what's wrong. And if we follow what he wants us to do, we know we'll be on the right track. But the key is to remember that it's not about us. It's all about him and what he wants to do through us by his grace and mercy through what he did on the cross through his son, Jesus Christ, dying on the cross for our sins so that we could have life, a new hope, and a shining light to a world that is in darkness. So, folks, we have challenges out there, but remember to always, always keep the faith.
You had a pretty big case this week out on the West Coast, and I want you to tell us what happened out there that we all ought to be happy about.
Oh, yes. I tell you, Mike, it was a major case, dealing with a Christian boarding school. Now, this Christian boarding school has been there for over 20 years, helping boys and girls get their schooling and their lives in line, and yet they were attacked. First, the state of California came in and had a raid because of it. Get this, because of an article, a 10-year-old story that appeared in BuzzFeed.
Oh, yeah. I call it buzzard feed.
Yes, buzzard feed. So that's all they had. They got a judge to give a warrant for a total raid. So you had 16 troops coming in with 2 canine units, more than a dozen social workers, raided the place looking for guns, ammunition, whatever. Didn't find anything. And instead of apologizing, the state of California, the Department of Social Services, said, oh, no, we're going to double down. We're going to file a lawsuit, and we're going to shut you down. So they filed a motion for preliminary injunction to shut them down because they said, you're technically really a community care facility, not really a school, a boarding school. And they know that if they became a community care facility, then they would have to meet the state standard, which has to allow them, forces them to allow the students to engage in full sexual exploration with relationships.
And how old are these kids?
Oh, all the way down to kindergarten. So
unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. And yet that's the mindset. That's how they run their schools, the state of California. They want to shut down, not just this boarding school. They want to shut down, the state of California wants to shut down every single Christian boarding school that does not adopt to their social worldview and values, which goes totally against a Christian biblical worldview perspective.
So it's not about tolerance, it's about intolerance of views that do not subscribe to a more modernistic approach.
Right.
Is that the long-term agenda, that it's not about tolerance, coexistence, that you believe what you want to believe, I believe what I want to believe, we get along, we live in the same community, which has always, to me, been fair. I don't care if other people want to live their lives differently than me.
Right.
They should have every right to do that.
Right.
But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about shutting down a view that does not adhere to one point of view.
Well, let me give you an actual case that we had this year. It was in Wisconsin, okay, not California, Wisconsin, De Pere, Wisconsin. They passed an ordinance telling churches that they must comply with public accommodation, meaning that if they if they hire someone, they can't have beliefs or values, say a minister, they can't say, well, minister, you have to comply with our value and definition of marriage. If you go and marry someone of the same gender, then you can't work here. Well, they say, if you do that, we're going to shut your church down.
Shut it down.
Shut it down. And it also applied to a Christian radio station that we defended as well. We went into court. We filed a motion for an injunction, and we prevailed. And the judge said, not only does this violate the state constitution, this violates the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment as well, the Religious Freedom Clause. So it was a wonderful success. But do you know what happened? After this passed, other towns in Wisconsin had already passed this. This was already spreading. And this was in Wisconsin, okay, not Seattle or New York City. So people need to realize how real this is. And that's why we at Pacific Justice Institute are committed to taking on every single one of these cases. We're very unique. We don't just take on a certain case here or there. We work hard to make sure everyone gets help, because all it takes is one of these fires to continue, and then it'll spread. Another case, San Rafael, talking about taxes.
Yeah.
They issued, this is near San Francisco, it's part of the explanation. San Rafael decided to issue a property tax against all churches and synagogues. And but they called it a per square foot building usage fee. So we went into court and we said, Your Honor, that's a property tax. And the judge realized that there's no limit on what they could tax if they get away with this. This little Baptist church, Valley Baptist Church, had to come up with $13,000 or the city was going to shut their doors permanently. We went into court, and thank the Lord for this one. The judge said this is unconstitutional, a violation of the state constitution, and it was halted. But if we hadn't halted it, make no mistake, other cities across the country whose city councilmen don't go to church regularly would likely quickly do the same thing to start gaining revenue and punishing churches who have a different worldview.
How can we help Pacific Justice Institute do the job that it does? Because you take on these cases pro bono, you help these people when they otherwise could never afford the legal assistance. How do we help you?
Well, thank you for asking that. We are a nonprofit organization. We do all our work without charge, all of it.
Which is amazing.
So, yes. We have a huge network of hundreds of volunteer affiliate attorneys. That helps a considerable degree. So we appreciate attorneys who want to become a part of that team. We have 9 offices now in California. But we're also looking for expanding offices in other cities across the country. So if people say, hey, I'd like to have them come to my town, I think we can make it happen. They should contact us. And also, we're supported by moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas. George Soros, for some reason, doesn't want to give to us. I don't know.
I don't think you want to take his money.
Yeah, no, I don't. But moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas, about 140 plus churches and others, they support our work and as a nonprofit ministry. And of course, we're very, very grateful to anyone who feels led to do so. They can go to our webpage, pacificjustice.org.